Hello everybody and welcome back to Punting Pioneer. I'm Corbin Hosler with CoolStuffInc as always, and this is Mono White Lifegain. You've seen it on Arena, probably in Historic, I guess back in Standard a little bit too, in Standards past, but here it is in Pioneer, and this list, or at least something close to this list, 5-0'd. I certainly made a few changes that I think have helped. So let's walk through Mono White Lifegain here. As you might have guessed, we are going to try to gain a bunch of life, but what does that actually mean? Like, why is that good? Life gain is one of those things that when you first start playing Magic, people say, well, life gain isn't that important. It's one of the things new players overvalue, but this deck, that's all it wants to do. And here's why. Heliod Suncrowned. Well, if we can get to 5 Devotion, it'll be a creature. We can get to 5 Devotion in this deck pretty easily, but whenever you gain life, put a counter on target creature or enchantment you control, and you can give creatures lifelink. We also have cards like Ajani's Pridemate that trigger off of life gain. This one gets bigger and bigger. We've got the Archangel of Thune here at the 5-drop spot. Whenever you gain life, put a counter on each creature you control. This gets going very, very fast. You can see some of these engines here with the life gain, right? That's 11 cards that are really huge payoffs for just being able to gain life. It's something this deck does incrementally with stuff like Leonin Vanguard. You get to gain some life and it becomes a 2/2 for 1. Linden, the Steadfast Queen, 3/3 Vigilance gives you lots of devotion for Heliod. Also, whenever white creature you control attacks, you gain a life. Daxos, again, 2 devotion for Heliod. Also, a big, big blocker with toughness equal to your devotion over white. And whenever a creature you control dies or enters battlefield, you gain a life. So you can see all the life gain engines we have in this deck mean that any matchup against, say, a red deck or something like that, barring some giant Embercleave shenanigans, is going to be a cakewalk. We're just going to gain so much life that aggressive opponents are going to have a really difficult time dealing with it. Now, control decks, slower decks, that may be a little bit more the problem, and that is why we have Thraben Inspectors. These are early plays that give you devotion. They're a place to put counters from a Heliod, and they get you cycle with that clue. So Gideon Blackblade, this is of course a planeswalker, always going to be a problem for slow control decks, and it's a really good aggressive one that fits with our deck. Knight of the White Orchid, this one's great on the draw especially, but even as a 2/2 first striker on the play, it's not the worst thing ever, but on the draw you get all the value. And of course, the bane of control decks since forever, Gideon Ally Zendikar. There was a solid year and a half in Standard when this was legal, where basically every format, no matter what happened, and I say format, each set that released, each season, so to put it in Standard, by the end of it, there'd be new decks come out, but by the end of it, every time it devolved into who had the Gideon Ally Zendikars on the battlefield. This card's just incredibly powerful. So I've got one in the main deck, one in the sideboard here for those decks. You don't want to, of course, being a 4-drop, it is expensive, but and Skyclave Apparition is the other thing rounding it out. This will hit Search for Ascantus just as easily as it'll hit, a Bone Crusher Giant or whatever other creature you need to get through. So this card is, of course, we know, incredible in almost every format. And I have to point out, I don't think I've ever played, nor did I expect to ever play, an Idyllic Grange deck here on Punting Pioneer, or Mining Modern for that matter. But it's kind of cool in this. We have a million basic planes, and it'll enter battlefield untapped most of the time, put a counter on a creature. And Castle Ardenvale will, of course, provide a stream of creatures. And oh, by the way, I've been mentioning devotion a few times. Nykthos also pays us off for that. Especially if we, get into the sideboard, we start talking about Master of the Unseen against slower decks, where you want to manifest the top card of your library. It's a fancy ability to essentially morph it, but any of your creatures can come up. So this is a nice grindy card. We got Baffling End, where you need a little bit of removal. Rest in peace for the graveyard. Selfless Spirit for those Wrath of God decks. Fiendslayer Paladin, I guess I don't know exactly what this one's here for, but something tells me that we'll know it when we see it, right? Some kind of black-red thing. So, all right, everybody. I think that is the deck here in Pioneer Mono White Lifegain. I've played against this thing on Arena so many times, a different version of this. I'm excited to finally be on this end of it. So let's jump into the games. It is time for Mono White Lifegain in Pioneer, folks, and this one looks like a keeper to me. It doesn't have a 2-drop quite yet, but you know what? Those are good 3-drops and a powerful 5-drop. And then Castle Ardenvale for the super late game, right? And we're on the play. I mean, this is definitely a keep. We get to see, I've never actually, I think I mean, someone can fact check me by going back through my videos. I don't know if I've ever actually played Heliod before. I mean, surely there's some deck somewhere where I played a Heliod, but I mean, I can't think of it offhand. Another land there is both not terrible and also horrible. I would have really liked to have had a play on that turn, like in Ajani's Pridemate or something. Instead, our hand gets a lot slower here with this Arboreal Grazer ramping our opponent and just putting up sort of a brick wall in front of us. That said, we got cards too, and here comes a Linden. I mean, it depends what our opponent's doing here. I mean, is this a counter spell that they're getting mana out of it somehow? Are they just putting a counter on the blast zone? I don't know what we're actually up against. I assume it's Temur Reclamation or something like that. I don't even remember what the what some of these lands are supposed to represent. But it was a counter on the blast zone, and our Linden resolved. So that means on our next turn we get to play Heliod. And as a matter of fact, I don't think we can do too much. If we draw something else, we might be able to play it with the Nykthos. But we play Heliod, and then we get to attack. Well, this is out the window, but can I cast Archangel? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? I think I can cast Archangel of Thune, so this might work out regardless. I'm sorry, I'm thinking out loud here, but our opponent can Thought Knot away the Heliod, which they do take away the triggers, but Archangel still comes out next turn thanks to the Nykthos, and then we still get counters on these, and I think we can swing both of them into the Thought Knots here. I'm going to draw a Heliod anyway. All right, well. All right, so this is 4. I have access to 5 mana. Yeah, it's just definitely correct to go with the Archangel here. There's a lot of triggers we're about to put on the stack. I mean, what's crazy about this here is that our 1/1 Leonin Vanguard is now actually bigger than the Thought Knots here. This is 11 damage coming in. I don't know what they're going to do. I mean, Blast Zone on 1 can take care of the Vanguard. Blast Zone on 2 does nothing, though. They're not particularly close to having any more mana. You have to have 7 for this? They don't have 7 more lands, so they have 5 mana. And we've got another Heliod waiting in the wings here, which I believe would enter as a creature. It doesn't change much. It does, but it doesn't change much. I give some of these creatures lifelink, though. Or our opponent just looked at their hand and said, you know what? I don't have the answers. So, okay. That was interesting. So we saw ramp. And blue-green ramp stuff. I say blue. I mean, we saw the, just a ramp deck. Okay. I don't know if that means like there's an Uro in there somewhere. Got Skyclave Apparitions in the main, though. That does so much work against the rando Uros. Rando Uro you might play against in a queue, or I don't even know if my opponent's deck could have it, but it's a kind of card that just wrecks you if you don't have a plan for it. I honestly don't know what we want here. It kind of felt like we just wanted to combo out our opponent, frankly, because that worked pretty well. I'm going to cut a land. I'm going to do it. I'm going to add a 4-drop and cut a land because I have that much faith in the shuffler. This is a mulligan because it's 3 Heliods regardless, but the one land there is kind of funny. As you can see, this is the hand I was talking about, and this has got what we need. I think I probably ship back the Skyclave Apparition here and just keep the high upside hand of Thraben Inspector into Daxos into Heliod. And I think it's fine to ship back. Well, what if I just ship a land here? You know what? I'm on the draw. Let's throw a land back because I'd hate to lose to some rando permanent because I put a Skyclave Apparition on the bottom of my deck because I got scared of not drawing a land. But we have 3 draw steps to keep on schedule here. And if it's very unlikely that even on turn 3, if we miss, we don't have a play. Although, obviously hitting the first the Heliod there with the first draw step, the opposite of what we want to do. But especially with the clue, you know, worst case scenario, turn 3, we have to crack a clue to go digging for a land. I think you just got to keep this hand statistically. No, we got an upkeep stop here to build suspense. We did not get there. One more turn before I look like an idiot. Thus far, I still look like a genius. Next turn, I might not. But even so, if we don't hit the land, we crack the clue. If we hit the land, then we can still play a Thraben Inspector. So honestly, it's not that bad all around if we don't hit here. And I mean, I don't actually know how to count that. That's not a hit, per se. It is not a land that allows us to cast Heliod, but I will take it because it puts a plains into play. I could get the Idyllic Grange. Now, that is cool. I did not realize that. It's a plains card, not a basic plains card. You can put an Idyllic Grange in. I wonder if this... Oh my gosh, off of a night. That's cool. That's really neat. As it stands, though, we're going to gain some life here. And we do get to be mana efficient. We get to run out of Thraben Inspector. So this still works out okay for us. In fact, I get to swing in with the Daxos. And the beatdown begins. So now we have 3 mana. We get to play a Heliod. I think that will gain us a life with the Daxos. And here is a Thought-Knot Seer that doesn't do much. And now I'm really, really glad that we did... they took the Skyclave Apparition, right? I would, if I'd shipped that to the bottom, I mean, I guess they would have taken a Heliod. It all might have been similar, but I do think we made the right decision there. It felt a little risky, but it paid off. And now I think we're in a pretty good spot. If this has to be good for my opponent, right? Matter Reshaper into Thought-Knot Seer. And as it stands, they just honestly haven't done much we care about. All right, I get to put a counter on something here. I guess I'll put it on the Knight of the White Orchid. First strike here in a while. I mean, look, we don't get to do anything yet. Right, I can't attack here. If my opponent has a board wipe, well, then the game gets pretty interesting. But they're not playing like they have a board wipe, right? Matter Reshaper into Thought-Knot Seer is playing to the board. But now we have an active Heliod. I can give creatures lifelink. We've got the clues. If they do have an exile effect or something, we've got a backup Heliod in hand. I don't know what we're worried about our opponent going massively big here, right? An Ulamog or something that we can't get around. Because as it stands right now, given enough time, we're going to have a better board, a bigger board that can do a lot. But our opponent could get to an Ugin. They could get to an Ulamog. I mean, this game is not anywhere close to being over. And the getting spammed by Heliods here is kind of rough, too. All right, there's a Pridemate. All right, what does this do? We get to put more counters on stuff? All right, we get to put a counter on Knight of the White Orchid here. And that gives us 2 attackers. With First Strike, the Knight can take on any combination of blocks outside of, I guess, a triple block from my opponent. These are the blocks I would expect. They're definitely playing to an Ugin right here. The problem for us is there's basically nothing I can do about it. The Ugin will get all of our cards, and I can't stop it from doing so. So we just have to attack and hope for the best, I guess. Right now they have 5 mana, so they've still got a ways to go, but keep in mind the Shrine of the Forsaken Gods, if they control 7 or more, it adds 2. So if they were to go land drop 6, land drop 7, on that 7th, they'd actually have 8 mana due to turning this on, so to speak. So instead, though, you gotta love this. This is so much better for me. I talked in the pregame about how just incidental life gain, and it's not incidental in our deck, I guess, but life gain, which we use to grow our creatures, but also just happens to give you a lot of life, right? Pads your life total, and your opponent plays a Reality Smasher as a blocker. That's not the worst thing ever, I gotta say. And drawing lands here is actually okay as well. I actually should crack that clue first, but looks like it doesn't matter. Because I could have hit a a different lane, right? An Idyllic Grange, a Nykthos, something like that. I'll put this counter on the Knight of the White Orchid so it can still attack into a Reality Smasher. And you know what? That means our Pridemate can attack as well. In fact, I can turn the Pridemate into a 6/6 if I want. All kinds of options here, frankly. I'm going to start building up the Leonin Vanguard instead because I actually want to just keep attacking with as much as I can every turn, because the longer the game goes, we'll have bigger creatures, but the longer the game goes, it's probably more likely our opponent finds one of those sweepers. So I'm not going to mess around with, well, what if they trade with my Vanguard? No, that's fine. Smasher can trade with my Vanguard. The Reshaper can chomp, and this is just fine with me. Oh no. I'm so much better than I thought I was. You know what? I've been on the other side of stuff like this so many times, I'll take it. So, Big Brain Plays, it was actually on board, and I totally knew it, right? Giving my Knight of the White Orchid lifelink when it has First Strike meant that this actually triggered, and I was able to make it a 6/6 that just killed the Reality Smasher. That said, our opponent now has all the mana. So we could be dead. We have to hope, I guess, I mean, Archangel of Thune is the draw. Archangel of Thune is the one that allows me to actually win the game this turn, because I think if we don't win the game this turn, we probably lose the game. And this is also a reason to be building up other creatures on my board. Archangel of Thune? One time? One time? We got 3 of them. Come on. Oh, we did it! I probably just blew up the microphone. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I screamed. That is how you call them. Lightning Helix. Cruel Ultimatum. These are iconic moments in Magic history of call top decks, and we just added another with this Archangel of Thune. Look at this. Excuse me. Slam this thing down. We have all the counters to distribute now. We get one off of that. We get one off of moving to combat here with the Leonin Vanguard. Look at it all. It's beautiful. I understand the appeal of playing this deck, and then you hit attack all. What an incredible top deck to take down the match. We had to go exactly land Archangel of Thune to make this possible. But I think that we did it. It looks to me like 16 damage gets through no matter what. 13 damage gets through no matter what. It's lethal. GG, everybody. That's why we play these matches. Oh, that's why I like recording. That was so much fun. Imagine doing that off camera. What's the point even? Thanks for watching. That was great. Well, I guess we'll play some more, but we're not going to top that. All right, here we go. Mono White Lifegain in Pioneer, and this looks like a keeper to me. So we're on the play. So this Knight of the White Orchid, probably not going to be quite as good as you would want it to be. But hey, I mean, that means we're on the play, right? So I'm not going to complain about that either. So we've got plenty of devotion here. 4 devotion in our hand already. 4 lands, definitely on the high side just a bit. But the double Thraben Inspector and the mana will be able to generate off the Nykthos. In theory, should be able to pull us out of this, I think, pretty well. And there's something to ramp up into. All right, basic swamp out of our opponent. Not much to gain from that. I'm just going to play the Knight of the White Orchid here. I don't know how long, I don't have any idea what my opponent's doing, so I don't know how long we'll be able to get in with the Thraben Inspectors. But I don't want to, with 4 lands, we're going to be making land drops forever. We don't need to try to get cute with the Knight or anything like that. And I think just applying pressure to the board, probably better than cracking the clue. We have plays for... Well, there's a Fatal Push, no big deal, but we have plays for the next several turns, I guess. Next turn, we get to play a Thraben Inspector and crack a clue. The turn after that, I was going to say we could cast the Archangel. Now we won't have enough devotion to, but... well, Archangels for days, I guess. I don't think this changes much. It does mean we're going to need to find a land in the next couple cards, and it's, you know, Archangel of Thune against a blue-black deck. It's not at its best, I'll say that. But we are putting a little bit of pressure on him here. And remember, we have, I think, 17 basic planes in the deck, but with this much mana, Castle Ardenvale becomes a live draw. Idyllic Grange actually becomes somewhat relevant in that, you know, it's a bad draw because it's a land, but if it allows one of our creatures to attack, then it could be worse. Our opponent's going for the free Shark Typhoon cycle, no token. I assume that's good for us, or it just means they have all the Shark Typhoons. I think it's more likely they were digging for mana and found it there with the irrigated farmland. So, all right, crack a clue. That is a play for this turn. Not the best play ever, but it is a play. I suppose I could crack the clue first. And they fatal push the knight, which at least suggests to me they don't have a wrath type spell here. Did I get censored? Did I just play that wrong? Yeah, I kind of did. It's okay, I think. I say that, like, my thought was, what if we find a different 2-drop to play? Because the Ajani's Pridemate isn't great here, right? It was fine, depending on what we played this turn. So, you know, since there was something I kind of thought about, but ultimately I think that's fine, because if they were digging for lands anyways, and they only have 1 white mana, the censor being used to 1-for-1 us instead of cycle into mana that they might need is not the end of the world. Talk myself into it a little bit here. Let's see if our opponent does anything crazy here. Shark Typhoon? Nope. All right. Well, I guess in that case, we'll just slam an Archangel, and if you have another censor, you have another censor, I suppose, but suspect and absorb this time around. Okay. Well, sometimes you make the decision to commit to playing around censor, and sometimes you just don't. I didn't, because I feel like we need to put pressure on our opponent. You know, maybe that was right, maybe that was wrong. I don't know. I think I probably should have played around it with the Pridemate. Maybe not so much the Archangel there, but now I can play the Archangel. We're playing around censor this time. Four mana to cast. What's it going to be? Oh, a dig through time. Wow, okay, so this means our Archangel is going to resolve. It doesn't necessarily mean much good past that for us, because, you know, look, my turn next turn, I play the Linden, I attack for a bunch, I get a bunch of counters. It might even be lethal. In fact, it would be, I think. I'd gain 3 life. I'd gain life 3 times. I'd put 3 counters on each creature. That adds up to 12 to me. But I was concerned about them finding a plains, a white source, and a Day of Judgment, Wrath of God, Supreme Verdict, whatever the Wrath of choice is in this format. I suppose it's Wrath of God in Historic, but Supreme Verdict in Pioneer. But without double white, my opponent can't do that. So we at least are going to get to attempt to line up a lethal swing next turn. That said, things are never good for you after your opponent casts Dig Through Time, so I do still feel substantially behind in the match. Then again, a Narset Parter of Veils to dig further is not the scariest thing. Let's see what it finds. A Teferi Time Raveler. Well, that's not helping them either. I think our opponent may have just had some incredibly awkward draw that I could at least attempt to punish here. And look, we get this sweet Idyllic Grange value. All right, well, let's play a Linden and see what happens. This doesn't get Fatal Push. It costs 3 mana. My opponent doesn't have Revolt. And I'm just going to send all of these at them, because this is a lot of triggers we're about to have. This stack is about to get very, very full. And let's see what happens. None of this life we're gaining particularly relevant in terms of our life total, but yeah, look at that. What is that, 915 damage we're coming in with? Let's see what your removal spell is. It's a fatal push on a Thraben Inspector, so you take 10. Okay. Well, they did not die, unfortunately. It was a big hit, but they survived. I mean, now we have 3 lethal threats. Our opponent has to find a board wipe. You know, a Teferi or something like that. Not going to be enough to cut it. They need some pretty specific cards. I don't think Teferi... I mean, I guess I was talking about Big Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, but Time Raveler is not going to do it either. Extinction Event might. Wow, how unlucky is that? We have 3 odd cost creatures. Obviously that... Wow, what a blowout. What an absolute unlucky blowout that was. And we're going to flood out on top of it. Okay, well, this is a lethal threat. Our opponent only has 6 cards in hand. We don't call it Punt and Pioneer for nothing. Although, I don't know. I think maybe the first Shinser was a punt. But I don't know that that would have made a giant difference. As it stands now, though, I think we're very far behind. We don't have any haste creatures. I don't know that we have a good way to put that 2 points through. All right, well, there's another lethal threat. We get to put 2 out there and make them have 2 removal spells or a board wipe. Certainly have more lands than my opponent. I mean, a full third of our lands are in play, I believe. Which is certainly not true of theirs. Excuse me. All right, well, they have 1 fatal push. Do they have an answer for the second one? Now, it's pretty unlikely they don't have an answer for this Knight of the White Orchid, but we'll at least make them show it to us before we move on to the next game. That unlocks double white for them. And it's another Teferi to bounce. Okay, well, that does work. I talked about the cards for control in the intro, and immediately we get paired against control, and you can see how good drawing Gideon Ally of Zendikar would be right here. Instead of flooding out. This is another dig through time. I'm done here. That looks like what it is. All right. I'm not going to waste time. I'm not going to chase the 0.5% of games where they have nothing there. All right, let's get the Selfless Spirits in here. Let's get the Mastery of the Unseens in here, the Gideon, and I guess a Rest in Peace because it doesn't hurt us, right? Leonin Vanguards are fine. Speaker of the Heavens I don't think is very good. We can cut an Archangel for sure. Probably cut a Heliod, or maybe even 2. Because the thing with the Heliod is we're unlikely to have the Devotion, in all likelihood, right? The Skyclave Apparitions are fine. We'll keep a couple, I think. Just to have a couple more answers to Planeswalkers. All right, well, let's give it a shot, I guess. It's that or I cut the other Archangel for, like, another Skyclave. Or just like the other Leonin Vanguard, we'll just go aggro. Okay, we'll give this a shot. I mean, the 5-drop combo piece that makes our creatures bigger doesn't necessarily matter. I don't know, in that first game, if we had sequenced differently there, we might have got that extra couple points of damage in. But I think it's more likely our opponent just had all kinds of cards and chose a greedy line because they could, and they would have just played a different set of answers otherwise. But, I mean, we don't know, but they had so many cards in their hand and resolved to dig through time. They knew what they were doing at all points there. That's why these are rough matchups. But this one looks all right here. We've got Ajani's Pridemate to trigger off this Leonin Vanguard. Thraben Inspector, draw some cards, and Gideon Blackblade having the Planeswalker is huge. So if we can just find a land off the top of our deck, had plenty of them last game. If we can find one this game, I think we'll be good to go. I have to say, I did not expect to see myself ever playing this card in Pioneer. I mean, I never even played this card in Standard, but I gotta say, it does sort of feel just fine here, right? You have to have 3 or more creatures, and yeah, that's a lot, sure. But I mean, we've got some stuff going on here now. I would obviously love to hit a land. off the top of the deck, so we can just slam the Gideon and honestly be off to the races at that point. We'd get to trigger the Vanguard and so on. But if not, we still get to play Daxos to gain life and start the whole thing up anyway. So we're going to force our opponent to have something. And honestly, I don't think I'd run the Gideon out into a Censor anyway. So still want to land, and we got there. But I'm actually going to play out the Daxos. Learn my lesson a little bit anyway. All right. Well, let's see if our opponent has anything here. I mean, this thing resolved instantly, but so they're just going to Fatal Push our Pridemate instead, I think. Frankly, fine. We'll follow up with a Thraben Inspector. Oh, they're going to push the Daxos. Really? Push the Daxos after I get the... Oh, okay, so I don't get the trigger. That's how that works. Okay. And when Daxos itself dies, you don't gain life. Okay. I mean, that's still fine. We get to resolve a Thraben Inspector here. Next turn, I get to resolve a Selfless... Or I get to cast a Selfless Spirit with mana open for Censor. Or redraw land and get to do the same with Gideon. Either way, hopefully have a Wrath-proof threat here. Now, I guess just like an Essence Scatter or something out of our opponent would get us. But instead, they're going to put a Hallowed Fountain into play tapped and Fatal Push the Pridemate. So, yeah, this seems very good for us. Barring Spell Pierce. They don't have the Spell Pierce. All right, well, that means the Leonin Vanguard is going to trigger. It's a 2/2. We get a swing for 3 here. I got to remember to actually use this Gideon ability. I guess I lost out on a couple points of life there. Something tells me that's not going to be what this comes down to. I'm not going to stress about it too much. All right, so our opponent now does have 4 mana, and they could have a Wrath now, right? We don't have the Selfless Spirit in play, but that's not particularly good for them given the Gideon just comes on in. But you know what? They have to do it anyway, which is great for us. This does not give haste, unfortunately. That'd be pretty powerful if it did. But look at this. We get to go Daxos, Selfless Spirit. We're protected from the next Wrath. Not that, you know, we have a ton of power in play, but we've got a little bit. And we've got a Gideon coming on in. And a Clue to sack. So this is the kind of game you want to play against a control deck. I don't know if it'll be good enough. They get to play powerful cards too. But this is the kind of game you can win. Whereas otherwise, you know, this sort of deck typically just folds to Wrath spells. I mean, honestly, though, being on the play, curving out, that's what was key here. My opponent couldn't even actually leave up those sensors. We didn't really... I think maybe one turn we played around it, but they just had to interact with our board instead. So here we go. We're going to get an untap with Gideon, a Selfless Spirit, and a Clue. And a Mastery of the Unseen. All right, well, let's give this Daxos lifelink, I guess. Indestructible. Against blue-white mana. Not that any of it matters too much. I guess, you know, a Baffling End or something like that. I think Baffling End hits Seal Away. Whichever the one that only hits tapped creatures is would be the most concerning. But not even that big of a deal. Because here we go. Our opponent just takes it down to 1. Now they might fight over the Mastery of the Unseen. This is the only absorbed target they've gotten this turn. But instead they're adding 3 blue. I mean, I would like to resolve this card in the event that somehow the board I have doesn't win. It's just a dig through time. This is probably fine. They have to find a way to answer me making my board indestructible. And they have to find a way to answer the Planeswalker. So this is problematic. And even if they do all of that, we still have a Master of the Unseen to start manifesting 2/2s on their end step next turn. So they are going to scoop them on up. Yeah, that makes sense. I think we just run it back. I don't want to play more than the 1 Rest in Peace because I like the idea of drawing a Rest in Peace that sort of counters, so to speak, the dig through times by taking away the Delve. But drawing 2 Rest in Pieces against this deck probably feels like a loss. So it's just one of those things where you saw in that game, we can beat our opponent casting dig through time. It's not an unbeatable card. So I don't want to lose the game because I drew 2 Rest in Pieces trying to get too cute. It's sort of like if you board in Modern a bunch of artifact hate against Aether Vial, and your opponent doesn't play an Aether Vial, and you have 2 Ancient Grudges in your hand, and you die to their Curse Catcher, right? To speak from a personal example, it's a little bit like that. So that's why we're going to play 1 Rest in Peace, and if we draw it, great, and if we don't, then that's not the game we're playing. Now, this is an interesting hand, because I kept the Skyclave Apparitions, because, I mean, what else are we going to do? But they're not actually that good in the matchup. I think I'm going to ship it. All right, well, this is terrible for us, but going to 5's worse, and at least the Rest in Peace answers the dig through time. I mean, they're not going to kill us slowly or quickly, and given that, well, that's rough, but given that we're mulliganing like this in the first place, we're not going to have a fast, whichever of these hands we kept, we weren't going to have a fast hand, so there was no hope of getting underneath them, so we just kind of have to buckle up, play the long game, and hope it works out. And of course, we're drawing the worst cards possible for that long game. The 1 Archangel, the Linden. Those are not the cards that give us any sort of recurring value against Esper Control. If you're Esper Control and you make it to turn 3, and this is what the board looks like, you've spent no cards on it, you're thrilled. So, not feeling great about this one, but hey, we get our worst matchup out of the way first, right? Selfless Spirit right on time. I guess this doesn't matter much. Selfless Spirit versus Linden, they're just going to get bounced by Teferi. Yeah, this feels bad. I gotta say. Our other hands were good. You know, game 1 was super close. Things went perfectly according to plan game 2. Game 3, we mulliganed, and I mean, whether you go to 5 or keep that 6, you're not in a great spot regardless. So I think I like keeping it. Because, you know, obviously we're flooding out here, so this isn't even particularly realistic at this point. But let's see what they do. All right, this resolves. I'm not even going to play the Rest in Peace yet. No reason to. Keep playing around Censor as long as we can, I suppose. Yeah, I just don't think we had any good options. Because, yeah, we could go to 5 and maybe get an aggro hand. But also, you know, maybe we could go to 5 and have 1 land and never draw a second, right? There's so many terrible things that can happen. You're going to have to get lucky at that point regardless. You can choose to get lucky with a slow 6 or choose to get lucky mulliganing into hopefully a fast 5, right? In this case, we kept a slow 6. May or may not work out. Certainly doesn't look great. I guess they can go under the detention sphere. Not that I think I can get rid of the detention sphere, but I don't think it makes a difference either way. All right, well, our only hope is to basically strain a bunch of dig through times in our opponent's hand. So, with my favorite planes set here, Shadowmoor, my favorite basic lands, let's run out of Rest in Peace. Daxos next. Now, my opponent can bounce the Rest in Peace, which is one of the reasons it's kind of worth holding. Is it kind of the one shot of getting rid of these cards, even if they bounce it. I mean, look, we're in it for small victories at this point, right? All right, well, let's play Daxos and watch it get horribly awry'd. Counter target creature spell with CMC 4 or less if it's countered this way, exile it. Okay, I mean, it's basically, in essence, scatter, right? A weird one, but it exiles, and you know what? With the card Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath, running amok in the format, horribly awry actually looks pretty good for a control deck. This looks terrible for us. I mean, we're very dead here. Flooding out when you already kept a land heavy 6 is not precisely where you want to be. And the fact they're even just throwing away their Teferi here feels pretty bad. I mean, second one coming down. All right. Is it a Narset? Narset would be the most problematic. Nothing is not horrible for us, I guess. Well, let's start with the Rest in Peace. See if my opponent they bait out a counter. It doesn't. It's fine. Thraben Inspector and a Linden. If my opponent's been holding on to a Censor for this long, I guess we're going to pay it off. But seems likely they've all been cycled. Nope, I guess not. I guess we're just always going to get censored. We have to put two threats on the table there, though. We just do. And honestly, the Thraben Inspector is probably a little more important than the Linden. Because neither, you know, it could be a Tarmogoyf, right? It's not necessarily going to win the game against this board. We're going to need another card. So that said, our opponent now actually has a win condition with the Teferi. So it looks like we're going to fall in 3, unfortunately. I could have bounced my clue. All right, well, I got 6 mana. That's enough to play both creatures in my hand. Go ahead and start with this thing. Don't really know what we're hoping to do, though. I mean, I guess the best case scenario is our opponent minuses on this Archangel. I'll play this one in case there's yet another sensor waiting or in the wings. Also, this one is better, I guess, as an attacker. If we... And they did have the sensor. That's funny. Oh, but they let it resolve? That's even worse for us. I imagine there is a supreme verdict in our future. Oh, and by... Yeah, I really do mean in the future because it's going to come on our turn. On our turn. Oh, they just have an extinction event. All right. I've seen enough here. Good games, good games, good games. On to the next one. Good match, though. All right, time to gain some more life. And this looks like a pretty good hand, I have to say. Now, it would be better if we were on the play, of course. I suppose, especially as our opponent launches off with a Swift Spear. We're going to put that good against aggro decks hypothesis to the test here. But REM looks pretty solid, right? I mean, Thraben Inspector, Daxos, Ajani's Pridemate. That seems good to me. I mean, heck, we've even got 3 planes and Idyllic Grange, right? It's a great hand. The play draw might be very, very important here. It's also worth noting, Daxos, you know, it'll have 3 toughness if I just play it out here on turn 2. And it doesn't, you know, I've been playing a lot of Zendikar Limited and Core Celebrant, the Lifegain engine there that works similar to Daxos. Gains your life for itself, but Daxos does not. It gets life when things die, but again, it is only other creatures. So playing it on turn 2 will not even necessarily gain me any life. My opponent could just skewer the critics or whatever, you know, their lightning bolt of choices. But instead, it's a Defiant Strike and a pass of the turn. So that means Boros Feather, everybody. That changes things. I'm not going to say completely, but it does change things a little bit. Obviously, the fact that they missed a land drop is the most important thing. If they miss again, I'll be counting my lucky stars. And then I obviously would be in a great position. But I don't know how I feel about our matchup with Boros Feather. I mean, I've got the Skyclave Apparitions in the main deck. We've got a few more pieces of removal in the sideboard. But they play so many ways to protect the Feather and so on that it may not even be enough. So look at this, though. Our opponent, and this is what I mean. The Reckless Rage on the Swift Spear. The Swift Spear gets to attack. It takes out our Daxos. I guess if I hadn't attacked, I could have blocked. You know, if our opponent ever draws a second or, God forbid, a third land, things might start to actually get kind of bad for us. Well, safe to say that won't be doing much. I guess for now I'm still racing. The thing about the Boros Feather deck is the reason probably that you probably don't win very many games where you keep a 1-lander and miss for multiple turns, but you can do stuff like this. This Reckless Rage is consistently not killing the Swift Spear, taking care of our board. I mean, they might just kill all of our threats, and then they draw lands and unlock the rest of their hand and run away with it. That's a thing that very well could happen here. Okay, well, you know what, though? Now I've got the 2-power attacker. All right, let's play the Pridemate out. And try this again, I guess. The weird little race, Monastery Swift Spear versus Thraben Inspector. I don't know what to expect now. Sooner or later, my opponent's going to find a second land, right? But at this point, I almost want him to, because it's more embarrassing to lose to an opponent who has one land. No blocks here, though. All right. The pressure has come off a little. It's a Defiant Strike to dig for a land. So we're going to get to hopefully untap with our board. And they still did not get there. Okay, well then. I guess that's certainly a thing that could happen. Another Idyllic Grange for me. I'd like to keep making this Thraben Inspector big, I guess. And we lay the hammer, so to speak. This is where our opponent now, it's Reckless Rage or bust here, because one hit from Archangel of Thune, it's probably all over. And we can, the big thing is here, I can still take a hit. It's insane. It speaks to the power of the Boros Feather deck that this was a game for as long as it was with one land for 17 cards, or I guess they drew some there at the end, 15 cards deep or whatever. Fairly absurd, I'm not going to lie, but you know what? I've been on that end of things too. That's magic. This is where this comes in, though. I know that. I said I didn't know where it would be, but I know we knew it when we saw it. And this is it. This is where Fiendslayer Paladin comes in for sure. What else, though? Probably Baffling Ends. These do seem like they would at least possibly hit a feather, and it's anything to take down feather. I'm going to be on the draw here, so these are actually good. The Skyclave Apparitions are good, too. Got a Baffling End. One of the first builds I looked at of this deck had 0 Skyclave Apparitions in, and I've seen a couple different versions, of course, right? There was the Ballista Heliod combo decks before they banned Ballista. So this is a thing that's existed for a while, right? But yeah, I mean, I got to say that not playing Skyclave Apparition in the 60, not just the 75, but in the 60 is, I think, a mistake for pretty much any white-based creature deck at this point. It's just that good. That said, what are we cutting here? I might cut an Archangel. Archangel is obviously very, very good. But hey, we got to make cuts, right? Got to land again. Worked out for us last time. I don't love 24 lands. I mean, that's why I like 23 better in this in decks like this. I mean, look, I understand that it's probably you should always play more lands, but you know what? I'm a rebel. I'm a rebel, and it's a lot easier to cut a land than it is to cut cards I like. So Archangel of Thune, get back in here. And this, by the way, everybody, is why it's called Punting Pioneer and not Pros Play Pioneer. Because we put a land in the sideboard and then we drew 4 lands, okay? Look, I'm a genius, okay? This is clearly not results-based thinking. This is the only way that it should be judged, is that it worked out this time. Anyway, this hand's actually decent, right? Thraben Inspector, Pridemate, Baffling End is a solid piece of removal. And it looks like our opponent mulliganed as well. So this looks like it's going to work out okay. I like basically that they mulliganed and they kept a Swift Spear hand, but hopefully that means it's not a feather hand, right? They're in on the Swift Spear, not the feather, because I have answers to this. I can Baffling End it away next turn. If I even care to, and I might not. I might just play the Pridemate instead. We'll see. We have to play this game around feather, though, right? That's obviously the most important thing. Well, now we'll definitely... I was going to play a Pridemate. Now, however, wow, look at this. It is definitely a Baffling End, because they're all in here. Gird for battle on those Swift Spears. I may as well chump block, I think. This is a lot of damage. I mean, turn 2 attack for 6 is no joke. So we just want to basically slow the bleeding here, and which is kind of an insane thing to say on turn 2, but that it is what it is. We'll Baffling End away one of these, and then we'll see what they do. But we have a Skyclave Apparition. either for the other one or for a feather, depending on what happens. So it probably will depend on what they do and what we draw, because if they're waiting to hold feather until turn 4 when they have a protection spell for it, I don't know if I can hold off on the Skyclave Apparition on turn 3, because the alternative is probably playing just a Pridemate with no Lifegain synergies out, or a Heliod, you know, really does us nothing. Meanwhile, though, like I said, I don't know how long I can wait, because my opponent is just beating us down. Look at this, coming in for 6 on turn 2, 6 on turn 3. But you know what? We still have a shot. I guess with Skyclave Apparition this thing away, and just because that makes them the smallest thing when it goes. But I'll tell you, 10th District Legionnaire is no joke. Whenever you cast a spell that targets it, it gets +1. Wow, it gets a +1 counter, and then you scry. Plus the thing has haste. This is a enormously powerful card. What is that? War of the Spark? Just, I mean, this is very good, and there you go, Reckless Rage onto the 10th District Legionnaire, because it turns it into a 3/3, and then the 2 damage it takes doesn't matter. So it's honestly might be the scry, might be the worst part of it, though, because you know, you play against a deck like this, and if you can sort of survive the initial wave of value and beatdown, then they're very prone to just hitting a couple extra lands and not being able to do anything, right? But 10th District Legionnaire and its scrying completely changes that. I honestly considered exiling the Legionnaire instead, but I think we just had to take the chance that they didn't have a removal spell and hit the one that, you know, gave it a smaller thing. Wouldn't mind a Wrath of God right now. But I mean, look at this. I thought we had a great hand, and frankly, we did. We went Thraben Inspector, Baffling End, Skyclave Apparition, and we lost soundly. I told y'all, Boros Feather, it's a real deck. Okay, let's try game 3. I want the other Baffling End after that display. Wow. I kind of want the other Leonin Vanguard. I want a Leonin Vanguard back in here too. We'll go with the 3/3 split on those. I mean, you can't cut too many of the Vanguards because they are one of your Lifegain engines that sort of turn your other cards on. So you actually can't cut that many of them. That said, I generally hate to cut the Inspector, but in this particular matchup, it may be better to just hope to curve out with a Vanguard and a Pridemate or something than it is to get the long-term card advantage. Or these aren't the cards I was supposed to cut at all, right? Maybe I'm supposed to cut some of this other stuff. Like, say, a Knight of the White Orchid on the play. I think we got that in there right in under deadline. Yuck. I don't love it, but I don't think I can ship it either. Removal, Planeswalkers, Gods. I mean, this hand has it all if it draws a land. And I mean, and having it all is no guarantee of winning, because our opponent can also have it all. But as we saw last game, but I don't think I can mulligan this hand. You know, being on the play, though, even if we just duplicate what happened last game, being on the play probably makes a world of difference. Unless, of course, we have 5 3-drops in our hand and don't draw a land after boarding out a land. Then I'll tell you it's a 24-land deck. Yeah, this isn't quite a Soul Sisters deck. You know, that's sort of the obvious comparison, but the truth is, this mono-white Lifegain deck, it's not quite Soul Sisters because you don't just have the 8 1-drops to guarantee you the Lifegain engine. You have to go a little deeper with the Leonin Vanguards and stuff to try to get there. That said, it is going to feel pretty bad if we don't hit a land. It won't change my mind, but it will feel bad. Well, this is a beatdown too from our opponent. Very, very good stuff from them. And we had our land anyway, right? Never didn't have it. That said, I don't actually know what to play here. I think it's a Skyclave Apparition because I can't actually cast a Linden with the Nykthos. And I'll tell you, some of the lists I looked at actually had more Nykthos in them. And I don't see this as a deck that needs 3 or 4 Nykthos because you don't have that much mana to sink into stuff, right? You have the Mastery of the Unseen's out of the sideboard is the only thing that really scales infinitely, so to speak. Outside of that, you're trying to get a 5-drop out of turn faster usually, or double spell on like turn 4. And that's like good, but it's also, hands where you have a Nykthos and you can't play a double white card is got to be pretty bad. So look at this though. Our opponent going 10th District Legionnaire with no spells cast. And there's our land. Wow. That is an interesting development. And I have to say, I think I'm going to play the other Skyclave Apparition and hit the 10th District Legionnaire. My opponent's missing land drops and not removing my board. Well, then I'm going to take out the card that allows them scries later on. And it happens to unlock my ability to attack for 4 here. So this one looked pretty questionable, and we've got a long way to go. Those Boros decks, especially when Skyclave Apparition is on my side of the table, they can turn the corner so fast, right? A Feather and then a Reckless Rage taking out my Skyclave Apparition. All of a sudden, I can't answer their Feather, and they've got a big board. So, yeah, I mean, this one's got a long way to go, and there's step 1 for them. That's the Feather. The problem for me is I don't know how much I can do about it. Five, 6, 7. Well, I can play 2 spells. Probably Gideon and Linden. Might be Gideon and Heliod, though. Actually, it's probably Heliod and then Linden. Yeah. I think this allows me to attack for a lot. All right, let's think this attack through. No, let's just attack. It's actually just really free because of Linden here. I just get to put these counters on the Skyclave Apparitions. Do I lose one Skyclave Apparition here? Probably fine, because it's a big hit and our opponent's at 12. We have to swing, right? So it's only gonna go downhill from here with the Feather. So I think we've got to try to get the hit in while we can. I got to turn this one into a 3, which doesn't matter much. So I may as well put it on the Pridemate, I guess. It still gets blocked by the Feather regardless. Still beats the Swift Spear. Let's see if we can make our opponent deal with it. Now, so the nice thing with this attack, though, is it does force a chump block. It's 12 damage, so they get to eat one Skyclave Apparition with the Feather, but the Swift Spear's got a chump block, and all that's going to happen here is our Skyclave Apparition is going to turn into a 1/1 on their side of the field instead of a Monastery Swift Spear. So it's a downgrade for them. We get in a big hit. Well, at least they hit. And they lose out a little bit. That said, this might be the high water mark of this game for us against this Feather deck. They're untapping with a Feather. That is step 1 of what you don't want them to do. And I went really aggro with my Skyclave Apparitions in this game, which I kind of think I needed to. My opponent missed their 3rd land drop and played that 10th District Legionnaire. So if they miss again on that land drop, this game's just over after that turn we had. As it stands now, it's not over, but it is going to be difficult, I think, for our opponent. We have so much devotion. Any of my creatures can lead to devotion. So it's tough to turn off Heliod. The Gideon's going to be involved as well. I'm going to have an indestructible Skyclave Apparition coming in here in addition to everything else. This is a rough spot for my opponent, I think. Especially, I get to add another Pridemate for, the plays after that. Plus, a little extra devotion. All right, so let's Gideon the Skyclave Apparition. Attempt to make this thing... It gets Vigilance, Lifelink, or Indestructible, so none of those give it Trample, but Indestructible is still pretty good here. We'll even give it Lifelink. All right, to the attack step. I think this is going to be good enough. This is a whole lot of triggers. To make this Linden nice and large. The Pridemate will be lethal by itself. I guess I could have put all of them on the Skyclave Apparition to actually make the Apparition a lethal threat as well. That might have been a better play. It might not make. I don't know if it's going to make a difference to this game regardless. I think our opponent had a real opportunity there when they untapped with a Feather, but without a bunch of Reckless Rages, it doesn't matter. It needed Reckless Rage on their turn, Reckless Rage on my turn, and that didn't happen. So let's see what they do about this massive attack where the 10-10 Pridemate must be chump blocked, and then 2 of the other creatures must be blocked. So, and there are 0 good blocks for my opponent. So it kind of looks like chump blocks all around here. Hope to draw something that probably isn't in your deck with Feather. You know, they need a Wrath of God or whatever here, right? Okay, I guess I'll use my mana. What doesn't have lifelink yet? This thing? I'll gain 10 life, sure. All right, they're paying costs. It's a God's Willing. Okay, well, that is very good for them. That is a card they needed to try to get something going here. They get to give the Feather protection, so they're going to get untapped with Feather again. They get a Scry. But I don't know what they're digging for at this point. That's the issue, because they're still taking a big chunk here. They're going down to 4. They're losing... Oh, they actually did this on the 10th District Legionnaire, not even the Feathers. So I really don't know what they're hoping to find at this point. I have all of the lethal threats, I guess it turns out. This is... Our deck is something, is it not? I mean, look at this. It's turn 5. We're playing against a deck that has, you know, at least an amount of removal in it. We've got a 7/7, a 7/7, a 5/5 God, a 5/5, and an 11/11. That is a lot of power. No board wipes. You're going to have a hard time against this deck. So I'm glad we got to see kind of all aspects of the metagame, right? We got a battle, a fun one there in match 1 when we get a control deck. And here we go against an aggro deck, right? And we had a nice match against it, although, yeah, combo aggro with Feather, but this was a fun one, and this was a chance for our deck to really do some of the cool things that it's capable of. And I think this one's about to come to a close. They put a card on the bottom with the Scry. They're going to attack my Gideon. I'm going to block. Oh, I can't block. It's got protection from wide. All right, Gideon's down. Oh my gosh, Gideon's not even down. Gideon's at 1. Okay, you got the Wild Slash to take out the Gideon. You did it. You did it. Gideon fell, but so did our opponent. There you go, everybody. That was great. Let's go check out... Oh my gosh, looks like I'm hopping into another one right after this. Let's do it. But what would we change about this deck? I think you could actually probably move a Skyclave Apparition from the main deck to the sideboard to play something else there. I don't know what it would be. I don't know if you'd want another Speaker of the Heavens, perhaps. This is certainly an okay card in some matchups, right? It can work out. I'm sure there's other 2-drops. You could mess around with more Planeswalkers as well. There's got to be some other Planeswalkers that would fit in the deck. Or you can go a little bigger, right? Start playing more Gideons, and you can kind of go for that that bigger game, and you play Selfless Spirits in the main deck. So lots of actually ways you can customize the deck based on your expected metagame, what you want to play against. I think 1 to maybe 2 Skyclave Apparitions is cuttable. You know, maybe you can cut a Heliod. Probably don't want to. Maybe I think the Archangels are a little bit of trim as well. If you wanted to cut down on the curve, you could cut down on a land. But overall, this was a really fun deck. I'm glad I played it here on Punting Pioneer. Everybody, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next week.